Imagine witnessing a rapid power shift so dramatic that it seems like it could rewrite the history books. What happens when three countries, fed up with being controlled by external forces, decide to leave a major regional organization and take control of their future? This is the situation unfolding in West Africa right now. Will ECOWAS be able to adapt, or will the AES countries show the world what true sovereignty looks like? While people were waiting for something ordinary to happen, ECOWAS showed a desire to get with AES, reflecting the guilt it was feeling. But will AES welcome ECOWAS? Here, we would like to take a moment and thank you for supporting us and being a valued part of our strong community. And if you are not yet a member, we encourage you to join us and help build an even stronger community together. Let's get started. "2025 marks a turning point in West Africa's political landscape. The Alliance of Sahel States AES, which includes Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, has decided to part ways with the Economic Community of West African States ECOWAS. This decision is not just about politics. It represents a deeper desire for sovereignty, security, and self-determination. The question now is, what pushed these countries to take such a bold step, and how will it affect the future of the region? The story of AES begins in 2023 when three Sahelian countries, Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, formed a new alliance. Faced with increasing insecurity and instability in the region, the AES was born out of a shared need to protect their sovereignty. With insurgency spreading and foreign powers' influence growing, the countries knew they had to unite to secure their future.
We are here to support the Pan-Africanist resistance in Faso, embodied by President Ibrahim Traoré, who, following in the footsteps of President Thomas Isidore Sankara, is waging a battle for the survival of our people. We have been fighting this geostrategic and political battle for 25 years, a fight for the self-determination of our people. The fight is based on a two-headed dynamic, to attack external enemies and also to attack internal enemies. My country, Benin, will end up joining the AES, God willing. When Dramane Alassane Ouattara, president of Ivory Coast, a tragedy for Africa, leaves power and Ivorian sovereignists take over, Ivory Coast will be a major AES ally. We've also come to tell all the enemies of the AES, Alliance for Sahel States, that by being the enemies of the AES, you aren't just the enemies of Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger. You are also the enemies of all the world's Pan-Africanist youth. The AES project is the matrix of the future confederation system that will take place sooner or later in the sub-region. And I say to the authorities who eat at the table with the colonialists, or people within civil society who still walk with the colonialists, pray. Pray that we and Kemi Saba never become part of the Beninese government, because on that day, you will understand the meaning of treason.
As they laid the foundation for AES, the countries focused on internal security first. The new alliance was about more than just military cooperation. It was about creating a self-sustaining future free from external interference. This was the first step toward the bold break from ECOWAS that would come just a year later, setting the stage for the turbulence to follow. The creation of AES was also a response to the growing dissatisfaction among many West African nations with how external actors, particularly former colonial powers, continued to exert their influence. The situation was made worse by the failure of some peacekeeping operations, leading to a rise in insurgent activity in the Sahel. Thus, the AES countries decided to take matters into their own hands, moving away from the structures that they felt no longer served their interests. As AES solidified its foundations, tensions with ECOWAS began to grow. Over time, Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger became increasingly frustrated with the bloc's failure to address the pressing security concerns they faced. ECOWAS, they felt, was more interested in satisfying the interests of foreign powers like France than focusing on the region's needs. This disconnect fueled a growing resentment. The AES nations began questioning ECOWAS's commitment to their security and well-being. Why stay in an organization that appeared more concerned with appeasing Western nations than solving regional issues? This frustration ran deep, as the Sahel had become a hotbed of conflict, while ECOWAS appeared increasingly powerless to stop it. This dissatisfaction was further fueled by ECOWAS's reliance on military interventions, which often failed to bring about lasting peace or stability. Instead of focusing on sustainable development or addressing root causes of instability, ECOWAS's response often involved temporary solutions that didn't address the broader issues at hand. For the AES countries, this was unacceptable, and they felt the need for a new approach. The lack of effective support from ECOWAS led to a decisive turning point in the relationship. With the AES countries growing frustrated, they started seriously considering their withdrawal. By early 2024, the frustration reached a boiling point. The AES leaders took the bold step of withdrawing from ECOWAS, a decision that would reshape the region's future. This was not just a rejection of ECOWAS. It was a clear declaration that the AES countries were ready to carve their own path. The decision wasn't made lightly, but the AES leaders knew that remaining within ECOWAS meant continuing to live under the influence of foreign powers. They believed that to regain control over their security and governance, they needed to break free. Now, with their withdrawal official, the next phase of their journey began, one filled with challenges, risks, and new possibilities. The AES countries were well aware that their decision would not only affect their relationship with ECOWAS, but could also impact broader regional cooperation. However, the belief in their sovereignty and the need for change was stronger than any threat. In addition, by distancing themselves from ECOWAS, the AES countries aimed to forge stronger relationships within the African Union (AU), an organization they believed could better represent their interests without being unduly influenced by external powers. The bold move wasn't just about rejecting one regional group, it was about building another with more local influence. Once the decision to withdraw was made, the AES countries stood firm. There would be no turning back. This wasn't just a political maneuver, it was a statement of independence. The AES leaders had resolved to build something new, free from the constraints that ECOWAS and external forces had imposed on them. The commitment to this new direction was visible in every move the AES took. They strengthened internal bonds, signed military cooperation agreements, and fortified their shared resolve. By making their position clear, the AES was sending a message. They would not be swayed. This determination set the stage for the next confrontation with ECOWAS, where both sides would have to face the consequences of this historic split. AES's unwavering resolve also signified the beginning of a broader movement within West Africa. Their stance was an inspiration for other African nations struggling with external interference, and it became clear that their departure from ECOWAS was not just a political shift, it was a paradigm shift for the entire region. As the AES leaders remained steadfast, the African Union began taking a closer look at how it could support more countries in similar situations, setting the stage for a new era of African-led governance. Here's a reminder to please like and share the video and subscribe to our channel to watch more videos on Black culture, history, civilization, and identity. Let's continue now. In response to the AES's bold move, ECOWAS attempted to intervene. The organization couldn't afford to lose 3 of its most important member states. Negotiations were launched, and ECOWAS sent representatives to meet with the AES leaders, hoping to bring them back into the fold. But the AES countries weren't easily swayed. They felt that ECOWAS had failed them in the past, and any attempts to re-engage would be seen as more of the same empty promises. The AES had already made their decision. They were determined to forge their path. The question now was, how would ECOWAS respond to a region increasingly breaking away from its influence? It was clear that ECOWAS's attempts to re-engage were not only about maintaining a unified front, but also about preserving its relevance in the face of growing criticism from its members. By trying to bring the AES countries back into the fold, ECOWAS was also trying to salvage its image on the international stage. For the AES countries, however, it was already too late. The momentum of their decision was undeniable. Despite ECOWAS's efforts to negotiate, the AES remained resolute in its decision. They set January 29, 2025, as the official date for their withdrawal. This date was symbolic, marking the beginning of a new era for the AES countries, one where they no longer needed ECOWAS to define their future. This date wasn't just about cutting ties with ECOWAS, it was about making a statement. The AES was drawing a clear line in the sand, saying that they were now in control of their destiny. This bold move was the culmination of months of growing frustration and political maneuvering. The symbolism of this date was not lost on other West African nations, and the impact of the AES's move sent ripples through the region. It wasn't just about 3 countries leaving ECOWAS. It was about the very future of regional cooperation in West Africa being up for grabs. Even with the AES countries firm in their decision, ECOWAS continued to push for a transition period. They proposed a 6-month grace period, during which negotiations could continue. ECOWAS hoped that this extra time might allow for some flexibility and prevent further division. However, the AES countries rejected this proposal outright. They were tired of negotiations that seemed to lead nowhere. The idea of a transition period seemed like an attempt to delay the inevitable. The AES had made its decision. They were moving forward, and there was no turning back. The AES countries were willing to face the consequences of their actions and move forward with their new vision, unburdened by lingering commitments or the wishful thinking of ECOWAS. The rejection of the transition period underscored their determination to redefine their future, and it was now clear that the AES would not be swayed by any external forces. The AES's rejection of the transition period only heightened tensions with ECOWAS. The organization hoped to maintain some semblance of unity, but the AES was determined to move on. Their refusal to entertain a transition was a clear signal that they had already set their sights on a different future. The AES countries had reached a turning point, and they were unwilling to drag out the process any longer. They were fully committed to their decision, and the world needed to accept that this was no longer just a political dispute. It was a fundamental shift in how the region would be governed. The significance of this rejection could not be overstated. The AES wasn't just rejecting ECOWAS's transition proposal. They were rejecting the very idea of compromise. They had already decided to step into a new world where they held the reins of their destiny. As January 2025 approached, the AES countries knew that maintaining internal cohesion was critical for the success of their bold decision. They took proactive steps to solidify their bonds, beginning with military cooperation. Signing a comprehensive pact that would ensure mutual defense in times of crisis, the AES countries made it clear that they were not only political allies but also military partners. This military pact was more than just a formality. It was a critical element of their survival. The countries knew that in the face of growing opposition from ECOWAS and Western powers, their unity would be their greatest strength. By ensuring that they would defend each other against external and internal threats, they effectively built a fortress around their new alliance. But this wasn't just about defense. The AES countries also began to discuss economic collaboration, hoping to build a self-sufficient economic structure that would be resilient to external pressures. Their vision extended far beyond military cooperation. They wanted to build a system where they could work together on infrastructure projects, trade agreements, and even cultural exchanges. The growing bond between these countries signaled that they were prepared to take on whatever challenges lay ahead together. The AES countries were fully aware that their decision to withdraw from ECOWAS was not just about politics, it was about carving out a new future for their people. They weren't merely breaking away from an organization, they were creating something entirely new. With no external interference, they began to chart a path towards sovereignty and security. This new direction wasn't just focused on short-term gains, it was about long-term survival and prosperity. The AES countries set about building stronger economies, securing their borders, and creating governance systems that truly represented their people's interests. They were no longer content with depending on the same old institutions that had failed them. The AES countries' new path also involved closer engagement with other African nations who shared their vision. They knew they wouldn't be able to achieve their goals in isolation. Their withdrawal from ECOWAS was not a rejection of cooperation. It was a desire for a more equitable, truly African framework for governance. This movement would later become a symbol of the broader struggle for African unity and autonomy. As January 2025 grew closer, the tension between the AES and ECOWAS reached a boiling point. The accusations and counter-accusations intensified. ECOWAS accused the AES of isolating themselves from regional cooperation, while the AES countries were adamant that ECOWAS was ineffective and beholden to foreign powers. In the eyes of ECOWAS, the AES's withdrawal was nothing short of betrayal. They saw it as an abandonment of the ideals of regional unity and cooperation. For the AES countries, however, the betrayal had already occurred long ago. They felt that ECOWAS had prioritized the interests of the West over the needs of West African nations, and they were no longer willing to be a part of that. This growing divide was more than just a political standoff. It was a stark reflection of the broader power dynamics at play in the region. The AES countries were challenging the entrenched power structures, and that challenge was being met with resistance from ECOWAS. The stakes were high, and as the clock ticked down to the official withdrawal, the future of West Africa hung in the balance. As the AES countries prepared for their official withdrawal from ECOWAS, the rest of the region watched closely. Some nations expressed support for the AES's decision, seeing it as a necessary step toward independence and a rejection of foreign influence. Countries such as Guinea, which had been similarly critical of ECOWAS's ties to the West, voiced their solidarity with the AES, hoping that this move would encourage a broader regional shift toward African-led solutions. On the other hand, other nations within ECOWAS expressed concern about the consequences of the AES's actions. They feared that the split would lead to greater instability in the region and could encourage other nations to follow suit. The impact of the AES's decision wasn't just confined to the countries directly involved. It had the potential to reshape the entire political landscape of West Africa. The world's attention was focused on West Africa as the AES countries prepared for their final departure from ECOWAS. Global powers like France and the United States, which had maintained a significant presence in the region for decades, were worried about the implications of this bold move. The withdrawal was seen as a major challenge to the established order and the influence of Western powers in Africa. The growing sense of uncertainty around the AES's withdrawal sent shockwaves through international politics. Would this spark a broader shift in Africa away from Western influence? Could the AES countries succeed in building a new regional alliance that could rival the influence of ECOWAS? These were questions that many in the global community were eager to answer. For the AES countries, however, the focus was solely on their future. They weren't concerned with how the world perceived their actions. They were focused on securing a future that was determined by them, not by external powers. As January 29, 2025 drew closer, it became clear that the AES countries were ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, united and resolute. As the AES countries moved forward, they did so with a clear vision: to build a self-reliant, secure, and prosperous future for themselves. The world would have to adjust to this new reality, as the Sahel was poised to become a powerful force in the region, no longer beholden to foreign interests. This was just the beginning of the AES's journey, and the world would soon see the full extent of the changes they were about to bring. Do you think the end of ECOWAS has come? Should it be given a second chance? Let us know in the comments section. After what it did for Western nations, can ECOWAS be trusted? Do you want to watch more videos like this one? If so, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon next to it. We have decided to bring videos on something nobody talks about: the Black culture, civilization, history, and evidence about how glorious Blacks have been. Thanks for watching, and until the next video, stay tuned.